psychotherapy. She is the founder of the Neuro-Recovery Solutions, a nonprofit organization which helps the neurologically impaired and their caregivers. Dr. Rozentsvit.
Thank you. I was a little bit overambitious to give like the title of neuropsychoanalysis and neurohermeneutics as a meaning-making methodology for
the microphone.
Okay, that I was proposing would be useful for psychohistorians, but it's not possible in half an hour really to do that. So real topic is a neurohermeneutics and psychohistory, allies or strange bedfellows. So what is really is this topic about? Life cycle of psychoanalysis originated from neurosciences, but then they took very different paths. In our time, the multi-interdisciplinary approach and evidence-based practice, these paths are crossing again. So this presentation will introduce some ideas about neuropsychoanalysis and its main methodology of making meaning by interpretation, or what I call neurohermeneutics. In his 1914 paper on narcissism, Freud predicted that all of our provisional ideas in psychology will presumably one day be based on organic substructure. Today, most of us agree that we do not need to subscribe to Cartesian idea of duality, rivalry of brain and mind anymore, but rather think in terms of connectomes and neural networks as systems, as we have progressed from I think, therefore I am, of Descartes, the philosopher, to I link, therefore I am, Singer, the biologist. So, so in this presentation, we will explore a little bit Freud ideas of the neuronal processes to be regarded as unconscious and to be inferred like other natural things. We also will touch upon MacLean's triune brain theory and Kandel's reductionistic approach to what is considered to be philosophical concepts, and his discovery of molecular mechanism of memory and learning, among others. In his 1895 letter to Fliess, Freud wrote, "I am tormented by two aims: to examine what shape the theory of mental functioning takes if one introduces a sort of economics of nerve forces, and second, to peel off from psychopathology a gain for normal psychology." So that's what we do in medicine. I'm a physician, so I'm trained as a physician, and we learn pathology and in mental health, psychopathology, and by figuring out what the psychopathology is about, we actually learn what norm is about. So it's like taking off, you know, like the sculptor taking off some stone, yes, and getting a normal figure, yes, or a normal portrait as a painter. So what I wanted to touch upon, you know, the main idea of brain-mind phenomena as a one unit, not brain versus mind, not brain better than mind, not mind better than brain, but brain and mind are two sides of the same coin. So what is the main ideas that I wanted to introduce here? This is a real Kuhn's paradigm shift, the brain-mind paradigm, because I was assuming that brain-mind are perceived as two sides of one coin, and when I'm, you know, presenting in different psychoanalytic conferences, and I'm just saying, okay, brain-mind. I was once attacked by Lacanians. They said, no, mind is somewhere, you know, it's somewhere, it's greater than the brain, and you know, and I respond, you know, and we had a very nice dialogue at the end. But first I felt a little bit attacked. And, you know, so my response was, yes, you know, we use, you know, metaphors for mind. We don't use that many metaphors for brain, yes? But if somebody's brain dies, that particular mind dies. Yes, some of that influence of that mind we keep in our heart, we keep in our thoughts, we keep in our maybe guts because, like inflict some kind of like anger or some kind of like discontent. But when somebody's brain dies, that mind dies too. So brain and mind, brain comes first, but as soon as it comes first, still in our mother's uterus, we already started to, the mind comes through. And then from that time on, even from like probably the second months of, that fetus's life, the mind already exists. It already can hear something, it can feel something, and from that time on, they change each other all the time. And that's because of the neuroplasticity that each of our brain has. So, of course, I also encounter a lot of like kind of stuff. Don't talk about biology that much because we are here talking about psychology. We are here talking about history. We are, like, yeah, psychology, biology is there, but let's talk about something nicer. But psychology does not exist without biology. So that that's why I am kind of brought Maslow's quote there. I suppose it is tempting if the only tool you have is a hammer to treat everything as it is a nail. So if I'm a neurologist, I only would be, vouching for brain, and somebody's psychologist would be only, interested in mind. But actually, we should learn from each other. We should integrate, and I think this is the change that people were asking about. I think this integration, this transdisciplinary approach, interdisciplinary approach, not inter, but also trans. We learn from each other, and that's how the change is possible. So, so many interdisciplinarians, psychoanalysts, psychotherapists, educators, psychohistorians are innate neuroscientists. I will try to prove it to you in a moment. Also, we touched upon today the attachment theory and history of childhood. We don't have time really to dwell on it, but this quote by Morrison, unfortunately he passed away. He was the best child writer and illustrator. He wrote once, "Childhood is a very, very tricky business of surviving it, because if one thing goes wrong, or anything goes wrong, and usually something goes wrong, then you're compromised as a human being. You're going to trip over that for a good part of your life." So here is some food for thought, trying to convince you to accept that biology is needed. Where is doubt, there is freedom. Ubi dubium, ibi libertas. And also William James was mentioned a few times today, so I guess this, he's welcome in this crowd. So I'm using his quote too. "The greatest discovery of our generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering attitudes of mind. As you think, so shall you be." Here is Francis Crick. He was one of the co-founders of DNA. He is not a neuroscientist, but he wrote a book, The Astonishing Hypothesis. And in his book he said, "The astonishing hypothesis is that you, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. As Lewis Carroll's Alice might have phrased it, you are nothing but a pack of neurons." And here is like a real brain scan on the top. Was Michelangelo a neuroscientist? Michelangelo Buonarroti, in his creation of Adam, he actually showed us brain and his knowledge of neuroscience. Here it is. The concealed neuroanatomy in Michelangelo's separation of light from darkness in Sistine Chapel. That was an article written in Neurosurgery journal, actually peer-reviewed Neurosurgery journal. Here it is, the brainstem looks like God's, Adam's apple, and the parts of, all the parts of the brain anatomy is out there, in that picture. In his project of scientific psychology that was actually written in 1895 before the interpretation of dreams, but published only by the end of Freud's life in 1950. He wrote that the intention of this project is to furnish psychology that shall be a natural science. What he meant by natural science? He meant the disciplines like biology and physics that dealt with matter by using measurement and experimentation. When Freud began this manuscript project, psychology was just emerging as a distinct scientific field. Mental phenomena along the province of philosophers were now being approached in much the same way natural scientists approach physical phenomena. So this is how it started. Sigmund Freud married to neurobiology and fathering psychoanalysis. The drawings are all Freud's drawings. He didn't have anatomical theater. He was not rich enough to buy cadavers, but he was looking at the fish brains and extrapolating his ideas into the pictures that further on proved themselves correct in how we understood the brain. Here's his idea of how the brain areas, the speech areas look. And I prepared here some history, but about Descartes and Galen, but don't have really time about it. But if somebody is interested in the slides, I can send to you by email. Here is Salpêtrière, Charcot demonstrating clinical lecture to his colleagues at Salpêtrière, a large hospital in Paris, that the symptoms of hysteria were as real as those of the organic disease. Charcot claimed that the resulting record of symptoms was valid for all countries, all times, all races, and consequently universal. The lower quote I really want to read. This is by Atul Gawande in New Yorker in 2008. He published the article that called The Itch. So the mind fills in the most of the picture. You get the sense of this from brain anatomy studies. If visual sensations were primarily received rather than constructed by the brain, you'd expect that most of the fibers going to the brain's primary visual cortex would come from the retina, from the eyes. Instead, scientists have found that only 20% do. 80% come downward from regions of the brain governing functions like memory. So we make things up 80% of the time. Or what we see is we are actually bringing from what we know from before or what we imagine. Richard Gregory, a prominent British neuropsychologist, estimates that visual perception is more than 90% memory and less than 10% sensory nerve signals. Here is a little more history. I really don't have time to talk about it because I really want to talk about brain, so I can, my passion for brain would, spill over a little bit, and you will get some of it. So what are the prerequisites of the mind? We need to know the brain basics. So the brain is only 3 pounds of tofu-like tissue, 3 pounds. It has 1.1 trillion brain cells, 100 billion brain metaneurons. It works always, 24/7. It uses over 3 pounds only out of whatever we are, 100 pounds, 150, 200 pounds, whatever we are. It uses 20 to 25% of the blood flow, oxygen and glucose, the nutrients. The typical neuron makes about 5,000 connections with other neurons and about 500 trillion synapses. Those are the ones that connect, allow one neuron to talk to the other. Here is the neuron, how it looks, and in the little circle there is a synapse. All cells of the brain have specialized function. Brain cells have particular ways of processing information and communicating with each other. Nerve cells form complete circuits that carry and transform information. So actually, brain is electrochemical machine, no more, no less. And this slide I always bring to every conference that I present, because though this is under a real like microscope, two neurons are talking to each other. You see a little lightning in the middle on the top. Those are electrical discharges that the scientists, saw under microscope and made a photograph. Now, this is the most interesting idea in neuroscience that probably is about 20 years old, or maybe a little bit more, but not more than that. It is about connectomes. What is connectome? Connectome is a kind of structural map of connections of the brain. The more older we become, we suppose we become wiser, yes? We hope we become wiser. And how do we become wiser? Why we know right away, like if we see something there, we can expect something bad, or we see something there, we can expect some pleasure. How do we know? How do we know to expect it? Because the older we grow, our brain makes all these maps, and it's kind of pre-cooked connectome are ready to go. So when we see something in the corner and it looks like a rope, yes, and we are here at NYU in the conference room, we know it's probably electrical cord and nothing we have to worry about. But if we are in the desert or we are somewhere in a wooden area, the same looking rope would be probably a snake, and we should do something about it. Okay, so how do we know about it? Because we had already experience, whether personal experience, somebody told us about, we read it about it, and all this information is already mapped in our brain, and it pre-cooked to go as soon as we see that rope or whatever we are encountering. Here I just wanted to show you that although we like to talk about equality, and we are all equal. Yes, we are all equal in in philosophical, psychological terms, but not biologically. We are not equal. Men and women, they have different connectomes. Women, this was a study, pretty large study, where they showed that women's brain, like left and right, contemplating, what if, how come, like answering those questions. So it's more processing left and right, while male brain is more processing front and back. That's why males make fast decisions. Females maybe don't make that fast. I mean, it's not extrapolating to everybody, but as a group. Don't maybe make that fast decision, but probably those decisions are wiser, are maybe more including, of different information. So this is just to show that we are equal, but not necessarily true in terms of our brain. This is another prerequisite of the mind, neural networks. So, if before we thought that our brain works in terms of centers, like speech center, Broca center, Wernicke center, now we know it's all about networks. It's not about centers. And all these neural networks also, all the concepts in neurology and neurobiology are open to interpretation. Like the same neural networks on the left as seen by the medical illustrator, on the right by the computer engineer. So the same neural network is perceived differently by people that have different ideas. And this is what Eric Kandel in his book, in The Age of Insight, was talking about the beholder share. He brought Ernst Chris's idea of beholder share, that each of us brings our own beholder share to interpret what we see, what we hear, what we experience. Because the same thing will be experienced, the same environment will be experienced by all of us. Each of us will have a different feeling about what's happening right now in this moment. Left and right also. We have left side of the brain, we have right side of the brain. Physically, they look the same. Anatomically, they look the same. But the left and the right have different type of processing. The left is more front to back processing. The right is more contemplative processing. What if and how come? But what we want to have is integrative processing. We want to have left and right, not left versus right. Some people put on pedestal left brain because they, it's fast, it's cold, calculating, it's, making decision fast, while some people are putting on pedestal the right brain because it's more sensitive, it's more inclusive, it's more thinking, it's more contemplating. But if that contemplating person comes to you for 10 years and it's an artist and cannot put his art on a show and feels miserable and feels like a loser, what's good about that right brain? The same as the left brain person is very fast, 99, every test. But what to do with that brain if they feel they're alone in this world, they don't feel connected to other people. So it's not left versus right, it's left and right, it's integrative. So the corpus callosum is one of the most myelinated structures in the middle that connects left and right, and it's very important. We know now that autistic people, they're lacking the corpus callosum, or the structure is very, very weak. And that's why they're very good about doing one thing, but they cannot connect that one thing to another thing. How do we store the body memories? How do we feel it? There is a knot in our stomach. How do we feel that our heart is flowing, breaking apart from love or from grief? How do we feel all that? It's all because the brain is connected to the body through the autonomic nervous system that is mostly located along the spinal cord. So this is not anything magic, it's all very biological. This is one of the most important slides that shows all the processes and all the phenomena that we need to know and we need to understand if we want to integrate neurobiology in our life and our practice. So the neuroplasticity, neuro is a brain or nervous tissue, and plasticity is ability to change. So ability to change is the most important function of the brain. Neurointegration, integrating left and right, sensory and motor, outside, inside, this is neurointegration, very simple. Neurogenesis, before we thought that we're born with a certain number of brain cells and they just die off when we get older. But we don't think that anymore. The brain cells can grow, and the mostly what is important to understand is the nerve connections that can grow. They can be pruned up because we don't use them, or they can grow more. So this is also important to understand. Neural circuitry, about which I already spoke, and electrochemical processes, so the brain is an electrochemical machine. Now, what is the phenomena that's important to remember? Wire together, fire together principle. So if something is like in the conditioning, yes? If something comes with something else, food comes with some sound, or hurt comes with some music, yes? Despite that music will be Mozart, if the hurt comes with that music, they wire together. They wire together once or twice. They wire together. Next time you hear that Mozart, you will be hurting, just because of that phenomenon. Synaptic pruning, I already said, in neurology we use a lot of gardening metaphors. So whoever is a gardener here, you know that you need to prune the tree in order for it to flower nicely. So the brain does it. Your brain is a big economist. It's only 3 pounds tofu-like tissues, so we don't have too much, space there to grow as much as we want. So we have to prune something in order for other functions to be pronounced. And don't use it, lose it phenomenon. We know it, we grow older, we don't use something, or we decided we don't want to play piano anymore, so we lose that ability. It doesn't mean we cannot pick it up, but we lose it for the time being. So the neuroplasticity, as I said, is the most important function of the brain. So the neuroplasticity has three types. Developmental neuroplasticity, that includes synaptic pruning. An example, at birth, we have about 2,500 synapses per neuron. At age 3, we have 15,000. And about adult age, we have half of that because of the pruning and because of the apoptosis, so-called cellular death instinct. So we were talking about death today, and Dr. Solomon was talking about death, and I wanted to hear if he will connect to any biology. Each of our cells has the mechanism for death. We in Western society, we perceive death as something bad. In Eastern society, they look at death differently. So it's all psychological construct that we impose on what death should bring to us. But actually, each cell has a death mechanism inside it. So this is just to show the synaptic growth and synaptic pruning with age. This is Eric Kandel. I told you about reductionistic approach of Eric Kandel. He received Nobel Prize for finding how the memory is stored. The memory is stored because the shape, for example, of the nerve cell or the shape of the synapse changes. And because that shape changes, we store the memory. That's how the memory is stored. This is how simple it is. But he was kind of crucified for the reductionistic. As soon as people in psychology hear reductionistic, it means it's too simple, it's too, not complex, we are more complex creatures like that than that. And, and they didn't, really accept him in the psychoanalytic circles. Although he was trained as psychoanalyst, he's a neuroscientist and works still in Columbia. He is close to 90. This is, don't have time for this, Phineas Gage, how his temperament and his character changes because the metal rod went through his frontal lobes and his character changed forever. He lived another 20 years with that metal rod. Interoception, don't have time for this because I want to really to give a few minutes to the triune brain theory. So Paul MacLean, he would be called today social neurologist or neurobiologist. But in his days, and he proposed this triune brain theory. He proposed that each of our brains, as we grow in our mother's womb, repeats the evolution of every human being, yes, and every creature that was before us. So we have reptilian brain, we have old mammalian brain, and we have human brain. It's like layers of the onion, one on the top of the other. So he called the reptilian or lizard brain, that is represented neurologically by brainstem and cerebellum, and it gives us the fight and flight reaction. So we have those schizoid mechanisms using patients and and people that we know. They are using mostly the lizard brain. They do have other parts, but they're mostly using the lizard brain as their mode of operandi. Now there are some other people that will be more of a borderline maybe structure. They will be mostly using the mammalian brain. What the mammals do, they kiss, they hug, they lick, they nurture, yes? That's what all mammals do, including humans, yes? So if person is living just in that emotional, limbic, emotional and memory area and is not going to any higher or lower, is just staying mostly there, the person using projective identification as a main defense mechanism, and that will be using that part of the brain. And then the human brain. It's all language, it's all abstract thought, it's all imagination, consciousness, reason, and rationing. So this was his. He proposed this theory. This is, I just showed how the brain in the mother's womb is growing. And then on the bottom, how it looks the same as MacLean's triune brain theory. And here is the response to trauma. So, and I made an analogy with MacLean. The response to trauma that was proposed by Dr. Ledoux from NYU in 1996. And his response to trauma, he's using exactly MacLean's triune brain theory. So if somebody has a stimulus, yes, and the response goes only on the amygdala level, amygdala that is processing fear, yes, the response will be very fast, yes. If somebody will be using the hippocampal and limbic area, then response will be slower because it's a kind of a second level. And the third level is the cortex. That is even slower, but it would be integrative response. But here what happens, if the person is using only one level, the first level, it will be very fast, it will be primed to do, to respond very fast, mostly on which level? Fight and flight reaction. And all the other parts of the brain will be shrinking. I just have two more slides. Now, what if somebody just using the limbic system and hippocampus and not really using the first level and the third level? The first and the third will be shrinking, while people will be living only in how they feel, how, like they will be just, just immersed in their feelings, but not really using their reason and not really using appropriate, maybe a response to threat. And here is some people that only using their cortex, neocortex. They are very well read, maybe they are maybe even professors and writers, but they are not really using their limbic system. They are not using their amygdala responses. So they will be living in that kind of head of Dr. Go, yes. So without any feelings about others or about society or about their loved ones. So what we try to aim is to neurointegration. Everything, brain and mind and body, internal parts of cell, memory and narrative, other people relationship, and the world relationship. That's what we want. Yes, so yes, so I don't know if we have any time for questions. I can answer. Any hands? Okay, yes.
Is there a way to get a copy of your slide?
Yes. You give me your email, I will send you by email. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Enjoy very much of your talk.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, one of your questions, you started with the brain and mind, and then one of your slides was the also soul, S-O-U-L. So, and I'm also a psychiatrist, so for the last 30, 40 years I've worked on the brain. My impression was, and I wonder if you correct me, that human being brain is not capable to comprehend no-dimension subject, I can't say subject, idea, non-dimension, such as the soul, such as the God, such as the, we have a two-dimension, which is when sun coming to the tree and shade, there's a two-dimension, but, and I've always seen this to religious people who have that brain, which I don't have, to comprehend non-dimension subject or idea. Do you have any comment?
Okay, I think I have. I think here is like Tibetan monks. They did this study on boundless compassion. Actually, brain does have centers, does have the area. It's close to the insular area that is responsible for compassion and responsible for meaning making. Insular area and singular area. So those are responsible for meaning making. So the pathways that are connecting here. It's many pathways. It's how we felt about, story making. It's about our love relationships. It's about everything coming there to have a meaning for our life. That's where we feel meaning. If somebody would have a resection of the brain because, intractable seizures and whatever, they will lose that capacity, to feel that.
I'm not talking about compassion, I was talking about dimension.
Dimension.
Is there any brain that can comprehend non-dimension subject?
Look, brain is a physical matter. You're talking about mind that is another side. It's like a genus, yes? Like one side is the physical that provides for the mind that is understanding the multi-dimensions. I guess it says it's enough.
Can you go back? Did you want to go back?
I don't know. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay,
There you go.
yes.
Yeah.
All right, so yes, I don't know, another question? Yes.
It's more a comment which relates to the question. There was a recent philosopher, and unfortunately I can't recall the reference, but he was talking about how a lot of philosophical concepts are really tied to basic body experiences, and in particular he talked about how the memories that we have of moving in space then also get translated into the perception of time, future, and past. And I wonder if the ideas about soul or other very highly abstract but emotionally important concepts, if they could also be translations of really basic experiences that we do have.
Our brain stores the memories, like if we talk about psychoanalysis, screen memory, what is it, yes?
Right.
It's something how we felt, something tremendous that we felt. We don't know, like, we don't know why, what is the importance of that. But when we come to analysis, yes, and we bring that, something comes up. It's like afterwardness, after Kuhn, yes? It's something comes later that becomes, colored with the meaning of trauma, yes? But when we are children, we don't feel it's traumatic, yes? Like what Ferenczi was talking, the confusion of tongues, yes? The children want cuddleness, and the adults only know how to respond with sex, because this is the language they know. The children don't know language of sex unless they're introduced to it, and it's not time for them, yes? So I think everything is stored in the brain because it's nowhere else to store. But then the mind makes connection to those places and pulls that information out, and then color, the meaning becomes different. And that's how we feel we were traumatized. That 20 years later, all of a sudden we woke up and we were abused. How that happened, not because we make it up necessarily, but because that something now has a different meaning. Now we know better. And at that time we didn't. But it's stored in the physical brain. Yes?
Sorry, when you're older, your memory does not appear to function in the same way. And I'm wondering what is the biological factor?
Yes, my friend, gerontologist, he asked me to work with, knowing that I got the training in psychoanalysis, he asked me to work with his older patients that looked like they demented. They got all Alzheimer's diagnosis, yes? And within 3 years, we built a program. 80% about, or even little more than 80%, they really didn't have any Alzheimer. They just didn't have any meaning of their life. The children that are overprotective, very good children, they were cutting off anything that these parents were doing. You cannot put the stove on because you can make a fire. You couldn't go by yourself out to the forest because you will get lost. You cannot drive the car because, God forbid, you will kill somebody or kill yourself. So these people were kind of pruning down their connection to the world, you know. But within our therapy, we pair them up with people that like the same things, like chorus, you know, choir, singing or something like that, and they perked up. And one person that came to me, she was like a very nice black lady from Caribbean. The only thing she was saying about herself, I am a dodo bird, I am a dodo bird, I am a dodo bird. After 2.5 years, when she left and I had to leave the program, move on with doing other things, she came to me and she said, I am not a dodo bird. And I wanted to write a book about it, but don't have time. But so yes, so you know, sometimes it is real disease, you know, because there are tangles in the brain and something genetic is going on. But in most cases, it's just pruned connections to the world. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there-
The CEUs?
Yes. Yes. I wanted to make an announcement about CEUs. I don't know if anybody needs CEUs.